Welcome everyone to our, I guess you could say, holiday edition of the Native Strong Town Hall. Our friend Mark is repping his Santa shirt. I've got my red and black and gray flannel on, if anybody can see that. And yeah, we're good to go here, raring to go. Dr. Ignatius is here with us, of course, to update us all on what is now going on here. Omicron is, showing up a little bit more, and so we'll get into that. Of course, for all of those of you who have joined us before, we welcome questions, as many as you got, throw them at us. We have a little chat box here. If you're joining us via Zoom at the bottom, you can drop them in there. Otherwise, if you're joining us via Facebook, you can just drop in a comment there, and I will be kind of keeping an eye on that as we go through the session here. As I said, Mark is here again with us today, so I'm going to pass it off to him, and thank you all for joining us.
Narawe Benezi Indigenous Namendodem on a Shnabe and now Neopit in Donjaba from Neopit I am from, and welcome everybody once again. We've been doing this for over a year and a half, and there is always this new challenge that's in front of us, and I'm glad you're here because those new challenges means that we need to have some new answers to an older problem that's becoming at least older for us, and that's around COVID-19. I did want to give a shout out to all our good friends that believe in Santa. That's why I got this shirt on. I did have "Don't Stop Believing" is what it said. And Dr. Ignatius and I hail from a little community called Neopit, Wisconsin. And there at a gym called St. Anthony's, we would often have a Santa Claus come in who would wear white pancake makeup because everyone knew, right, that Santa Claus was kind of a different sort of color than the kids running around the gym. So he wore this makeup, and of course he'd start to sweat and it'd start to run, and kids would look at his face and wonder if it's the real Santa Claus. And turns out he was. You guys, don't stop believing in Santa out there. Omicron's on us, but with good smart thinking and good questions asked today, got some gifts from Dr. Ignatius. And also we knew that it was Santa out in the open because we had a lot of these hanging in the trees. These are hides we'd hang in the tree for the birds, or cut little pieces off for our dogs. And that's kind of what it looked like in our hometown community. It looks a little different in the city. Neighbors complain if you put up a deer hide in the tree. The birds love it, but so we try to be a little less obvious. So that's just my kind of fun way to acknowledge all our good friends out there. Don't stop believing, and keep at it. Don't stop believing in yourselves. We got a lot of challenges in front of us, and one of those is Omicron right now. So let's turn this over to Dr. Ignatius, learn what we can, because we need to bring that knowledge forward to our gatherings. So Dr. Ignatius, over to you, and let's have a really good, informational, solid program and help our families out there. Dr. Ignatius?
Yeah, holiday season is here, and one of the events that we like to host here for the Greater Milwaukee area is our annual Christmas toy program, where we offer gifts to families of Native kids, and every year is a little more successful than the year prior. And this year we're looking at giving out close to 1,200 gifts to Native kids of the Milwaukee area, and that's just a good thing given this time of the year. And we know what the impact of COVID has been, not just physically and emotionally, mentally, spiritually, but economically as well. So this is just an opportunity for us at the clinic to give back to the community. And so that's going on today. But, Mark, thanks for the introduction. Jeremiah, thank you. Slightly different format. We're getting a little more high tech in our presentation. So what folks will see is sharper images of graphs that I've talked about in the past. And so we're trying to upgrade our way of presenting information. So the latest that's going on right now, Omicron, it's taken over the news cycles, and it is a very hot topic. It is changing almost by the hour. New information always comes out. And so what I'd like to do is talk about what we're seeing here in the US with Omicron. This is the CDC has been on it. They've been sequencing, they've been looking at a lot of what's been going on, and presently we're seeing this Omicron in 34 states here in the United States right now. Hard to get a solid number on the exact number, but you can see in the darker shaded green where Omicron cases have been confirmed here in the United States. So it is, I wouldn't doubt if all these other states have seen them, they just have not been able to sequence them out, and they probably have had Omicron in circulation for a good week or two already. But cases are quite prevalent right now, and it's sweeping. And what's going on globally, and you know, I talked about Omicron 2 weeks ago, Omicron being the B1.15.259, and this is really coming out of this new variant coming out of South Africa. And it seems to have made a big leap in what's going on. So first diagnosed or first acknowledged in South Africa, and then we started seeing cases in other countries, in particular in the United Kingdom. And I think what we're going to get out of information that we get from the UK and South Africa are really going to be kind of the leading beacons here of how what can we expect to see. We should keep an eye on both South Africa and the United Kingdom. So what's going on in particular in the UK, I have a map here of the United Kingdom and all of its regions and provinces and its, I guess you could say, counties, outlining everything about England. And they broke 80,000 cases in a day. Now, that may not seem like a whole lot. It's a population of about 60 million. So 80,000 cases may not seem like a lot compared to what we see here in the United States, but this is a pretty significant number. And in fact, this is probably the largest. This is the largest number of a single day newly diagnosed COVID in the UK. So they're getting inundated right now with new cases. And one of the things that they are seeing is that there are a lot of asymptomatic cases. Even though they may be positive, they are clinically asymptomatic, which is a bit concerning because that could mean that there is a good portion of the population that is just don't know they have it, which could be lead to kind of one of two things, good things. One, yes, they could have it, and two, if it's asymptomatic, it's certainly an indication that they're not going to get ill or get severe disease. But as a result of such a high volume of asymptomatic cases, they're actually estimating right now in the UK of over 200,000 cases ongoing on a daily basis. With this progression, and the number of cases that are going on, if 200,000 today now, what they're looking at what could possibly happen is nearly 1 million cases by the end, 1 million cases per day by the end of December. Now that's pretty significant. They have never seen that many cases, so you can kind of you can get the sense of what the UK is going through and why there's such an urgency of trying to get a lid on this as quickly as possible. It is early on in Omicron, and so what truly is going to be the impact has yet to be determined, because there are discussions about its symptomatology, and I'll go through that here in a little bit. But a higher number of cases could indicate a higher volume of hospitalizations. And if that's the case, which could also lead to fatalities. Now, what's interesting here is that the UK has not experienced, now they've been in this for about 3 weeks now, before Thanksgiving. Now, they haven't seen a significant increase in hospitalizations, because we still have to remember that we're still in the wave of the Delta still. But with the emergence of Omicron, they haven't seen an increase in hospitalization, or what I listed here as MV, is mechanical ventilation. This would be someone like in the ICU. They've had confirmed cases that have been hospitalized, 10, and they've had 1 fatality, but they have not actually listed out what the acknowledged the individual or the underlying conditions for that case. Now, what's strikingly unusual about this variant is how fast it is transmitting throughout the country. It's highly contagious, and their estimations right now, the UK's estimations, that it's 8 times more transmissible than present Delta. We know Delta was the most transmittable contagious variant of COVID to date, and what the UK is experiencing, that it's 8 times faster than Delta. So these are the early, kind of these early indicators that are coming out of the UK that we are going to have to pay particular attention to. Now, here are some graphic displays of the weekly cases. The top bar graph there is the weekly cases and the daily cases. And so you get a sense, looking at the daily cases, that those numbers are increasing on a regular clip. Right now, the health experts, health ministers are estimating that 20% of all cases right now are Omicron. And in London proper, they're looking at London at about 44%. Now, this was actually a couple days ago. Going into next week, it's probably going to be more like 30%. In London, over 50% of all new cases will be Omicron. What's interesting, since the presentation, or at least the acknowledgement out of South Africa, they were looking at a doubling time of about 3 days. 3 days going from 1 person to, doubling that number. So you can see the exponential growth here is pretty significant. Then they revised that and saying the doubling time is 2.4. And as of yesterday, the doubling time has been changed again to being less than 1 day. So that is pretty amazing. Nothing in this world have we seen that would be transmittable this fast, so quick in doubling. Reproductive number, RT, is 4. What that means is basically if 1 individual is infected, that 1 individual has a reproductive number or transmitting that infection to 4. people. Those 4 people each have 4 people, and you can see how this number exponentially increases pretty quick. Incubation period between exposure to onset of symptoms, 3 to 4 days. So it is really quick in onset, not only in transmission, but also if you're going to develop symptoms, it'll be pretty quick in knowing that you're ill in a time frame of actually getting it. So 3 to 4 days. Like I said, they're estimating by the end of December, just in a couple weeks, that there will be nearly 1 million cases diagnosed or estimated to be in communities in the UK by the end of December. Now, if you look at what does that mean for, let's say, even the US, if we start looking at numbers, you start applying these doubling times, reproductive numbers, incubation times. Obviously, the US is well over 300 million people. UK is about 60 million. They're estimating 1 million cases per day. What would that translate into the United States? And it could, by the end, in about a month, to the end of January, we could be looking at, this is just theoretical numbers, but estimating that there could be 2 to 3 million cases of Omicron per day in the United States. So this is a fast onset, highly contagious variant of COVID. And I think the big question everyone is wondering, what's going to be the impact, not just clinically, but also on our health system as a whole? And those are the bigger questions of what's going on. So here, South Africa, obviously the origin site for this new variant. You see on the bar graph, the weekly cases, you see the high spike in numbers and the daily cases that are going on the bottom. This weekly case, they're testing often, and people are coming back positive. And right now they're seeing the highest number of weekly cases they've seen in the history of COVID in South Africa. So this is pretty significant what's going on there. Now, the Health Research Institute in South Africa has kind of come out with some information regarding what they're seeing in Omicron there. They're saying that 2-dose course of Pfizer shot, as well as previous infection, having COVID previously, with the disease may give stronger protection against the Omicron variant. So that's what they are seeing on the ground, boots on the ground, seen in South Africa, that being vaccinated or having previous infection to COVID does provide you significant protection against Omicron. So that is kind of good news. That is good news. In their experiments, blood plasma led them to estimate that there would be about 73% protection against symptomatic disease from Omicron, and 95% against severe infections for those who have been vaccinated and previously infected. Okay, so that's pretty important, because we've talked about, what's the difference between people who are unvaccinated to people who are vaccinated, but this is taken into consideration of people who've had COVID and have been vaccinated. So if you think about it, obviously being vaccinated gives you a level of protection. Your body develops an immune response to a level of protection. But there is something to say, and up until now, may not have been an open discussion about natural immunity. So now we have individuals who have been infected, having developed natural immunity, on top of that having vaccines to boost their own immune system, are actually showing to be the most protected against severe infections. And I think that's important. I think that has to be part of the discussion moving forward, is how do we integrate and look at people, because we've had a lot of people who've had COVID, and we have a lot of people who are vaccinated, and we have people who are unvaccinated. So there's really going to need to be a splicing of information here, and how how diverse our populations are now, and what is the clinical impact as a result of this. Scientists also estimated that 35% protection against symptomatic disease and 77% protection against severe infection for those who've only been vaccinated. So people who have not had COVID, just vaccination as their primary defensive immunity, 35% against symptomatic disease, 77% protection against severe infection. So obviously having had COVID and being vaccinated puts you in a much higher category of protection than just being vaccinated alone. So that's kind of interesting information that has come out of South Africa and makes you wonder Omicron and your level of protection and what's going to be moving forward for yourselves. Now, it has Omicron is in the United States. There are different regions that have more cases. We've heard about New York, Minnesota. We've heard cases in California, even in here in Wisconsin. But what I thought was kind of interesting yesterday, out of Ithaca, New York, Cornell University just has a major outbreak of COVID. And their testing indicates that the majority of these new infections are of Omicron in nature. 883 students tested positive. And what was interesting here is the vast majority of cases were found to be in individuals who were vaccinated. Okay. So that kind of goes back to that previous slide where South Africa, here at this bottom here, saying it's 35% protective against symptomatic and 77% protection against severe for those being vaccinated only. So what's interesting here is these are already individuals who are vaccinated. Don't know if they've had COVID and been vaccinated, but these are probably a school that prides itself in prevention and insisted on students being vaccinated. And there's still the vast majority of these students who contracted Omicron are vaccinated. So again, that's an interesting point because we are a state that's our country that's highly vaccinated. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot of news about Omicron from here on out probably for the remainder of this year. And one of the things to keep in mind is that with the emergence of Omicron, we are dealing with two epidemics simultaneously ongoing right now in the United States. And we're not just dealing with Delta. We will be dealing with Omicron as well. So two epidemics, crises will simultaneously be going on at the same time. And do keep in mind that Delta is still the primary variant in circulation. And estimations right now from the CDC is that about 3% of all new cases now are Omicron. Now, 2 weeks ago, there was 0.0001%, and now we're already talking that it's 3%. And you can, kind of do the math kind of quickly, and what does that look like in another week? Will it be 5%, 10% of all new infections, and then the following week, 10%, 20%? So you can see how quickly this is going to spread throughout the United States. Other information from the CDC, they looked at identifying 43 individuals, sequenced them, found it to be Omicron. What they've seen from these 43 is one vaccinated person has been hospitalized and no fatalities due to Omicron. The most common symptoms so far are a cough, fatigue, congestion, and a runny nose. That's what they're seeing right now. What they don't describe is the degree or severity of these symptoms. And I'll let you, in the next slide, I'll let you know a little bit more what doctors on the front line in South Africa are experiencing. Among those 43, 58 were between the ages of 18 and 39. 79% were fully vaccinated at least 14 days before onset of testing positive. So again, the vast majority of individuals are showing to be vaccinated. And I think you could make the same case of what the UK is saying, although they haven't delineated their vaccine status and cases, but I am assuming based on what the CDC is, what South Africa is saying, the vast majority of new infections are coming from vaccinated individuals. So that's something to keep in mind moving forward, what we're going to be heading into. Now, what I found kind of interesting, and I had to parse this out a little bit because from different sources of what individuals are actually saying. Part of this comes from South Africa and the providers in the front line there. What are the clinical symptoms? And what I find interesting is in South Africa, as well as what the UK is outlining, is there is a tremendous amount of asymptomatic individuals that are testing positive. Asymptomatic. So when we kind of throw that term out there, what we're talking about is minimal to no symptoms at all. You know, you may have a scratchy throat, maybe you feel down, maybe you feel a little tired. That's pretty mild. That mild to almost nothing. But they do get tested and they do come back positive. So what is the underlying status, immune status these individuals are expressing? And the vast majority of these individuals that are showing to be asymptomatic are individuals that have had COVID in the past, which means they have a level of natural immunity. Okay. So again, the vast majority of people that are asymptomatic showing minimal to no symptoms, but looking in their history, they have prior COVID infections, which underlines the natural immunity has what appears to have clinically a high level of protection. On the flip side of this, that we're seeing individuals with cold-like symptoms. People with headaches, maybe body aches, maybe a sore throat. The duration of these cold-like symptoms is 1 to 2 days. And what they're not seeing is people are not expressing any loss of taste or smell. So this is having cold-like symptoms. And again, we're talking going from asymptomatic to, you know, a degree of symptoms. You know, as far as a headache, we all have had headaches. Some can be very mild, and some can be really severe. Body aches, you can have body aches. Maybe you feel a little achy for an hour or 2 or 6 or 12, and then it goes away. We've all had sore throats over the last 18 months. We, you know, equate that to maybe allergies, seasonal. Maybe this is the beginning, but it usually goes away, and it's really not that severe. We have flu, so their status are seeing a higher degree of individuals that are actually vaccinated. So now there are flu-like symptoms that are occurring: severe headaches, severe body aches, nasal congestion, runny nose, cough, much like what the CDC is saying, what they're seeing. And these are your more typical flu-like symptoms. So if individuals, I've had the flu, people in the audience here who've had flus, you know what this feels like. It feels like you've kind of been run over by a truck, and your body aches, your bones ache, You get chills, you get headaches, you can have a cough, nasal drainage and everything. In South Africa, they're seeing people who are exhibiting flu-like symptoms are the unvaccinated. Okay. And then obviously we have COVID-like symptoms that are beyond just the flu. And these are usually the worst case of symptoms with loss of taste and smell. Obviously the cough, shortness of breath, and the fever. And obviously the unvaccinated vastly outnumber the vaccinated. So there are, if there was an underlying take home to this, is obviously being vaccinated offers you the best line of protection. But in this, when it comes to clinical symptoms, I'm not talking about articles that are being written. I'm talking about frontline people who are seeing COVID and people who are in South Africa seeing COVID. There is something to say about having natural immunity. And so that's doesn't get talked about much here in the United States because everything is about vaccines. But with this particular variant, with Omicron, it may show to provide a much higher level of protection than we initially had perceived to think. So what's going on here in the United States, again, Delta is the primary variant. In the Northeast and in the upper Midwest, infections are still, there are high rates of infections going on. So we're talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Indiana. So all of these regions right now are leading the case rate here in the United States. In terms of hospitalizations, there has been just a steady increase of daily admissions of hospitalizations with individuals with COVID. So that also plays into this whole realm of what Omicron means for the United States. Here in Wisconsin, the rate of vaccination, just recently, the Department of Health Services has included the age group of 5 to 11, and we see that 11.3% of 5 to 11-year-olds have actually been vaccinated to date, and we see that's most recently in the last month. With the eligibility of this age group, we're seeing that individuals are taking advantage of the vaccines. And right now, so if we take all population 5 years of age and older, here in Wisconsin, 57.5% of the population has been vaccinated with the race and ethnic breakouts here on the right-hand side. When we start looking at the entire United States, so the age group with the highest risk, 65 and older, 87.3%. When we start including the younger age groups, populations 5 years of age and older, we see that there's over 202 million, almost 203 million individuals have been vaccinated to date, which is about 65%. So that's a good portion of individuals that are vaccinated. And so that is going up slowly with every day. On the bottom half here is the highlight of boosters. Obviously, boosters are important. In particular, the highest age group that are at risk, 65 and older, boosters 52.3% as being the largest group, which is certainly important when it is related to the variants that are going on. Daily counts, total doses being administered. We kind of see this ever slow increase in these large dips in numbers of vaccines. Most of these doses that are going out right now are boosters. A good portion of these, I'd say more than 70% of the vaccines that are given out on this slide are boosters, not primary series. So it's a little misleading, but if you look through the tea leaves, you can see how these rates are playing out, and it's mainly due to individuals getting boosters. What's going on here in our neck of the woods, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the native populations with respect to each state, we see that Michigan, almost 8,000 cases over the last 2 weeks. They're averaging about 251 new cases per week. That is, it's kind of a flattening of new cases for Michigan. In Minnesota, almost 12,000 cases, averaging 309 per week. And it looks like Minnesota has peaked and maybe turning a corner on a downward trend. Here in Wisconsin, over 10,000 cases, averaging 217. That is less than the previous of 235. And it looks like perhaps we may be on the down slide. In terms of rate of population, 13% in Michigan, 15.7% in Minnesota, and almost 20% of natives here in the state of Wisconsin have been confirmed to have COVID at any one time. So still a significant issue for each state and all the respective tribes and families in this region. So here in Wisconsin, the COVID cases continue to be taking an upturn. The trend is going up. We've had, I think, over 4,500 cases the other day. We are now averaging just over 3,700 cases per day. And this is starting to feel and look like what it was like back a year ago. We're kind of falling in the same peak of cases, and this is Delta now, and this is right on the heels of Thanksgiving. So of the time of the year when families and friends tend to gather and visit the most, this is a bit concerning going into the new year, especially with Christmas and New Year's, what this is going to look like coming out. And with Omicron emerging quite quickly, what is the impact of this going to look like here in the United States? And my sense right now is this trend will continue to go up. As transmittable as Omicron is, these number of COVID cases are going to trend upward. So this may be kind of the new beginning that pushes Delta out, and Omicron being the primary variant coming soon. In terms of vaccinations here in our southeast part of the state, the dark highlighted blue is our county areas with 70% or higher, the lighter shades with fewer degrees. And so we see that there are certainly areas that are highly vaccinated, and there are areas that have very low rates of vaccination. Looking more specifically at Milwaukee County, in terms of cases, kind of diffuse and all over. And then we start looking at first dose administered per 100,000 residents. And obviously we see there is a disproportionate rate, a lower rate of first dose vaccines given in the near north side up to the Brown Deer area. So in terms of how the natives in Milwaukee County are doing, in the last 90 days, there have been 0 fatalities in the native population in Milwaukee County. This is where kind of the one time you want to be on the far right-hand side of this type of graph. 90 days and counting that there have been no deaths related to COVID in the Native population in Milwaukee County. And that's really significant. And when you start looking at other races and ethnicities here in Milwaukee, this you don't see these numbers. You don't see numbers like this. And one of those reasons that may be attributable to this is that the Native population here in Milwaukee County has the highest rate of vaccination of all race and ethnicities here. Nearly 71% of the Native population has received at least a single dose, and 65% have completed their series. So that's 3% more than the Asian population, 8% more than non-Hispanic whites, almost 20% more than Hispanics, and almost 30% more than the African-American population here in Milwaukee. So looking at this fatality rates, how to explain that? I think you could look at this as one of the primary drivers as what's leading to that no fatalities in the 90 days, and that's 90 days and counting. So the longer this goes, the better. So again, this is really looking at the demographics of Milwaukee County residents and what the level of vaccinations that are occurring right now. So obviously boosters are a big deal. They have been a big deal. And you can see a large portion of any vaccination that's occurring on any given day is mainly due to boosters. Second to getting the primary first dose of vaccinations, and then obviously with the completion, a 2-dose series. So, but the majority of any vaccinations that are occurring here in Milwaukee is due to boosters. Again, this is just looking at what type of vaccine that is being given. So it looks like Pfizer is the predominant vaccine that's being given. And certainly with the addition of 5 to 11 now being eligible, we see a good portion of this green as Pfizer is the primary vaccine that's being administered right now. And this really just depicts the same as well as it, including the boosters. So Pfizer really kind of leading the effort to get vaccination. So this is a slide that I presented before, but this is a much cleaner way of visualizing it. So this is really looking at over time between race and ethnicity and the percent of the population that have received at least 1 dose. So looking at from the very beginning of literally 12 months ago, where we started out with frontline healthcare workers, and over time we have these timelines of when groups of individuals became eligible. When you look at the native population, the purple line, we see in January, February, kind of a steady increase, and then all of a sudden in March, we see that single one increase, one huge increase in percentage of vaccination, and it just continues to increase. Well, if people remember correctly, that was a time in which our facility had a pretty massive campaign to vaccinate the Native population in Milwaukee County. And you could see the effort that has allowed us to increase more than 15% of the Native population in a short amount of time to get vaccinated with at least a single dose. And it's just been a steady increase, and we've been able to maintain that over time here. So that is really a nice depiction of effort here for the population to be vaccinated. Again, this is showing the residents who've completed the vaccine, the 2 vaccine series with the Native population really excelling in this effort. Incidence rates here in Milwaukee County. These next slides are going to be a comparison between Milwaukee and the state. So in Milwaukee County, we see that the incident rate of vaccine for natives is 146 per 1,000, and that kind of ranks right in the middle. It's between other races and ethnicities. When we look at it from a state standpoint, overall, we're it's second in prevalence or number of cases per 100,000. We look at hospitalizations here in Milwaukee County. We see that hospitalizations are second. We look at the state overall, again, second. Population fatality rates. Now here, we see that the Native population has a very high fatality rate, nearly 2 per 100 cases. So that's pretty significant, especially when you compare it to all other races and ethnicities. When you look at it from a state as a whole, again, the highest rate, fatality rate in the state. Looking at numbers of overall numbers of what's going on over the last couple of weeks and where are these infections coming from. So up until this past couple of weeks, the vast majority of cases were in the younger population. And younger, I mean like high school, elementary, middle school age groups. That number is starting to recede. And now it is now becoming more apparent that the 30-year-olds are now becoming the predominant demographic age group of who are getting the cases. When you look at the lower half of the right side, you see that there's 2 arrows. One age group going up, and the other age group going from 0 to 9 going down. We see the highest rate of cases of the age group of 30 to 39. So that is a different trend that is going on in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Before it was all younger people, less than 20. Now it's starting to coalesce more into the 30 to 39 year old groups. What is of interest, and in the past 2 weeks, Wisconsin has had their first fatality of an individual that was in the age group of 0 to 9. This is the first time I've seen it, and the first case in the States since this all started. And also a new fatality in the age group of 10 to 19. A bit surprising, given the longevity of this pandemic. It's been months and months, probably close to at least 5 months before the last fatality. I don't know the underlying conditions, if there were any underlying conditions that may have led to these 2 fatalities. But this is, I needed to mention that this is the first time we're seeing it. So I wanted to bring in a reminder, when we talk about public health, we talk about prevention. It's not, when we talk about prevention, it's not talked in these terms so much because these are more technical terms, but we talk about primary prevention, secondary prevention. We talk about primary, we're talking about what can be given in reducing someone's risk. Vaccines obviously are a big way of prevention. Avoiding high risk situations using masks, social distancing, and providing testing. These are that primary basis for prevention. Secondary is like looking at preventing illness from spreading to others. So once diagnosed, we do a lot of social isolation, quarantine, screening individuals beyond just the primary person to people around. When we do surveillance and we treat symptoms when they appear. So this would be what kind of therapeutics are people taking to help reduce or minimize their risk of spread of droplets. And we have tertiary prevention. So this is the management of disease and minimizing as much harm and assuring recovery to individuals. We don't really talk, I don't talk much about this other than what is down kind of in the horizon and what's coming down. But we have therapeutics to treat individuals. Remdesivir, an inpatient, we have monoclonal antibody therapy as an outpatient treatment. And now we have the emergence of oral antiviral medications such as molnupiravir and Paxlovid. And so these are two new medications that are coming out, will be coming out, the sooner the better, that will have a huge impact on the prevention of not only symptoms and recovery, but also reducing severe infections, reducing hospitalizations, and even reducing fatalities. So, so when I talk about specific items, I'm referring to the public health approach and these 3 tiers of prevention. So, and something to round out the end of the year, GLIC is hosting the New Year's Eve sobriety powwow. We have several sponsors: the Indian Community School, which will be the host site. Milwaukee Indian Education Committee will be help sponsoring us, as well as the American Indian Chamber of Commerce will also be supporting. 7 p.m. to 2 p.m. ICS. We do ask that people show proof of vaccination and at least have a negative test, COVID test, if you're not vaccinated within 72 hours. And so I know this is a lot of stuff, high level information. So Jeremiah, I'm gonna give this back to you.
Dr. Ignace, Jeremiah is working with your elves over there.
Got it.
Some beautiful pictures of some gifts that are going to be handed out. We know yesterday, because of high winds, that the toys that were to be given away was canceled out of an abundance of caution for folks. So that's going to happen, and he's going to come in with an update. I do have a question for you, though. 2 of them wrapped into one. One is, can a person have, and it was an interesting question, can they get Delta and Omicron at the same time? And a lot of the second question related, though, is as Omicron gets more widespread, a lot of hourly workers, does this mean that if it won't last as many days, does this mean they won't have to take off as many days because it won't affect them as much? Talking about kind of that, passing it along. So those are my 2 questions, and we can go over to Jeremiah. Sounds like he's here with us.
Yeah, that's kind of a interesting, that is a good question. It really is, because, you know, up until now, we talked about COVID. When anybody ever gets COVID, we kind of anticipate that it's going to be at least 7 to 10 days people are going to be out. One of the ways that the public health approach here is that, hey, you're automatic, like schools. Schools will say, hey, you're out 10 days automatic, whether you feel better or not, you're out. One of the other ways would be the test-based method of showing 2 negatives within 24 hours apart. So, as I mentioned, you know, there is a high level of asymptomatic and mild disease that is occurring. Like the majority of new Omicron cases are either asymptomatic or mild symptoms in nature. So does that mean you have to automatically be out? I suspect we're going to be looking at the test-based method, 2 negatives within 24 hours apart. If they're both negative, either returning back to work or even returning back to school. So that's, you know, it's an interesting point, because I know Delta or COVID did go through my house. And you could pretty much, I think for adults, it was a good 7 days, almost 10 days before people felt like they're back to their normal, that they could actually go back to work. For kids, you know, my kid got it, and within 24 hours went from feeling okay to bad to feeling okay, and then by the third day was completely free. So kids do react differently than adults in terms of their symptoms. But it's going to be an interesting question. I think what I would be looking at if it was to come to my place of employment is probably looking at the two-based approach, testing negative twice before people can return to work. And it may actually be shown to be a much shorter duration. And there's one other thing I wanted to make a point about these clinical symptoms of COVID. What was so interesting as a provider, you know, when I assess individuals who come in with any type of symptoms of a cold, sometimes what will be, I guess as a provider now, with what I'm hearing and seeing from what's coming out of the either the UK and South Africa, is that there is a window of symptoms. And that window of symptoms could certainly be, you could wake up that morning and feel like, maybe I got something, maybe I got a little headache, hey, my nose feels a little congested, my throat's a little scratchy, but I'll go out and I'll go to work, or I'll go and do out my normal stuff of daily routine, not knowing that you actually have Omicron and that you're actually transmitting it, even though you don't really feel sick. Maybe by the next day, maybe the symptoms are a little better. By the third day, they're completely gone. And that's what they're seeing in South Africa. So either that window of diagnoses can be missed, or if you actually do see the doctor with these so minimal to no kind of non-symptom based signs, providers may kind of dismiss those symptoms as being, oh, maybe it's allergies, or let's wait and see if it really is something. And that's the risk that frontline folks are going to, it's that window of catching Omicron, because if it is asymptomatic or even minimal to mild symptoms, it's that window of opportunity that you could actually miss the diagnosis of Omicron, and that could be a leading issue going into this winter, as transmission is going to be huge.
Jeremiah, are you with us?
Yeah, took some photos of our lovely holiday party going on, so back in the chair.
So when he gets those up, that kind of leads to another question, Dr. Ignace, as he's loading those pictures up, is again, can someone get these two things together, Delta and Omicron, or does one force the other out? And that moves into the second question, is we're seeing lots of hospitalizations reported out on TV in the Milwaukee metro area. Mm-hmm. When should someone go to the hospital? When kind of, and I get that it's up to that individual, but a lot of our elderly people are living with younger folks that watch over them. And our elder folks are really good at saying, you know what, don't you worry about me. So this one's kind of out there for the kids that have elders living with them. What are we looking for? And we need to get them in.
So there's two questions here, and one kind of leads to an interesting theory that's being discussed right now. So you asked that, can you get Delta and Omicron at the same time? And the answer is you could. In theory, you could. Could you get Delta and a common cold virus at the same time? And the answer is absolutely yes. So there are co-infections that do occur. And one of the theories right now of how Omicron came into existence is that this co-infection idea. And the theory right now is that COVID caught a cold virus. And what I mean by that is that COVID, as well as other coronavirus-like cold that caused the common cold, occurred simultaneously. And what they're seeing in Omicron is a mutation sequence that would be consistent with having a cold-like virus that's different from the current COVID virus. So simultaneous co-infection can occur, and what they think, or at least what's being theorized, is that COVID caught a cold virus, causing the mutation that led to the development of Omicron. So yes, it can occur, not likely, not Delta and Omicron, that would be pretty horrific. But COVID and another virus that can cause a cold, yeah, that can happen. As far as symptoms for elders, probably the biggest, there are a couple things that I think people need to be very mindful of. Is their breathing. If their breathing becomes more labored or faster, I should say, if they're breathing rather than from a normal, breathing cycle to maybe a more rapid breathing cycle, that could be an indicator. Being more fatigued, or the inability to get from a sitting position to, let's say, going to the bathroom or going to the kitchen or going to bed. The absolute exhaustion and fatigue that people feel just from this minimal level of activity going from one spot to 30 feet over, if it leads individuals to be extremely fatigued and tired, that is a pretty good indication that something bad is going on. Eating and drinking. And the lack of eating and drinking or lack of taking in fluids could be a very good indicator that our elders are getting dehydrated, which can lead to a progression of the illness pretty quick. So fatigue, dehydration, and their breathing. These are the things that I think you should really pay attention to when individuals get ill.
So I'm gonna support that and say to you elder folks out there that love saying, well, I feel dehydrated, and they drink pickle juice.
Hey.
Which is an old, they're eating pickled eggs and all that. That generation, pay attention to what Dr. Ignace is saying and help watch over your grandma and your grandpa and your dad and your mom. We know to do it, but we got better tools right now, what to look for. So thanks for that. Jeremiah, I think we're about ready for you, because don't forget, everybody, that, it's not just Omicron looking for you, it's these little kids too, and all their snacks coming after your health. So listen to Dr. Ignace here, Uncle Johnny and Aunt Jill out there say, eat healthy. So if you do get something, you're in a healthier position to get better.
Yeah, you're gonna have to drop those over at my work here. I'll make sure they get taken care of.
Nothing like 1950 snacks from the bunker to get the older folks excited, like Dr. Ignace. Jeremiah, are you ready? No,
Yeah,
he is.
sure.
All right.
Thanks
Go ahead.
for holding the fort while I was getting some photos of our event going on here, and it looks like a lot of families are having fun, getting some food in their bellies, getting some gifts. So pretty exciting, stuff going on here at Glick. Yeah, I don't think I don't want to rehash any questions that you guys might have already covered. But yeah, with that, of course, Dr. Nace, leave us with some recommendations, thoughts on, next week or the following week? We're looking at Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, a couple days of holidays spending with your family. I know we'll be back on the 30th, I believe, for another session, but give us some thoughts on what we should look forward to, or I guess, or how we should kind of act or during these holiday times with our families, and try and get around this next new variant, Omicron, during the holidays.
Yeah, this next couple of weeks are going to be interesting, and certainly after the holidays. This is the time of year a lot of families and friends get together. And probably the biggest thing that I could suggest right now in these gatherings is really just be more mindful of where you're going to be and the interactions that will be occurring. Be mindful of our elders at this time, and individuals that have some level of symptoms that are going on. I think with what Omicron is, and certainly its level of transmission, just a very big reminder, the need for either that booster or maybe finally deciding on getting the vaccine. So be mindful of our families' gatherings and settings, and I'm not saying you can't have them, but just be mindful and the respective distance that that would be needed, especially during this time with everything that's going on. So as Jeremiah mentioned, we have one more session, and that'll be December 30th, Thursday. What I'm going to try to do is kind of put in a year in review, and really highlight where we've been and over the last 12 months, and more than likely have a much greater idea, or not an idea, but a much greater sense of where we're going with Omicron here in the United States, and what that impact is going to be with us in the upper Midwest and our native population. So stay tuned for that. And Mark, you have a grin. Do you have something to say?
I do. I do want to add on to that. I know that a lot of people seem to be nervous, and rightfully so, about this new Omicron piece that's presented itself. And we know that the mutations were going to happen. We know because of this show that there's a natural progression of virus, and it seems to be happening in front of our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the virus becomes milder, more widespread. I'm sure not in this predictable path as we're seeing it, but there is a way forward. And I think we're beginning to see it. We'll see, and that's why we're doing the program. But the smile was, that special invitation for me, especially to a lot of folks don't have the resources, the money. Gerald L. Ignace Health Center there to help with some toys, at least a little bit, for your kids. So please get in contact with them if not already. And also we have that New Year's event coming up. And I get to be the MC with another MC, co-MCing it this year. It'll be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that, especially the fry bread ball drop.
Oy.
It's the highlight of any New Year's Eve powwow, only done here in the metropolitan area of Milwaukee. So I just want to invite you all to be a part of it. And for those of you that have those issues, and I include myself, mental health and so on, even if it's one day, hey man, I'm going to start that sobriety path again, or maybe try it out. Or maybe it's you're going on your 58th year. This is a place to be. This is a kind of event that you go to. It's a way, it's a good pathway to health. It's a good pathway to a new year. We get to be around each other in a very beautiful space with our community healers, and they're going to make sure that we gather in the safest way possible. So that's just me adding to going past our 4 o'clock hour with a smile and say, please come out. And for those of you suffering from those opioid addictions, alcoholism, all of those isms, thoughts that may concern you of isolation and loneliness, be a part of this. because it's more than just a powwow. It's getting together, reaffirming each other and supporting each other and all the things that face us with joy and love. So it's not just in someone giving you a lecture. It's actually so good to see you. So glad you're here. And that's it for me. Dr. Ignace, like Jeremiah said about 10 minutes ago, you got the last word, but I just wanted to give this extra kick to have folks put it on their calendar and please come out and let's be together with each other in that very good and positive way. Thank you.
That's right. You're going to be the MC. You're going to knock it out. You're going to knock it out, brother.
That's right. Me and this guy. Yeah, don't stop believing. Dr. Ignace, don't stop believing.
That's a song, right?
It is. You're right. You're old enough to remember.
Journey. Yes, yes, yes. All right. So 2 weeks, I'm going to give you all a year in review and an update where we are, the latest of Omicron. That will be the day before we host our New Year's Eve sobriety powwow. If you're looking for a place to go, and you'll see Mark will be there, I'll be there. And so this should be a great time and an opportunity to engage in your fellow Native culture. And so until next time, everyone stay strong.